Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. On this episode of the podcast, we're honored to welcome Lori Chavez-DeRemer. Lori has actually won an election, which is uncommon for a lot of our guests.
Are you saying it's rare?
It is quite somewhat rare for those of us right of center. And so she was 4-term mayor of Happy Valley, correct?
Two-term.
Oh, 4 years. 4 years. Oh, yeah. 4-year term. So 8 years, 2 terms. Right. Okay. Sorry, I screwed that up. She ran for state representative a couple of times, and that's where we met, is knocking doors for your campaign in 2018. And then now you're running for Congress in CD4. No, 5. CD5.
That's correct.
Okay.
CD5.
Okay. Screwed that all up. But anyway, why don't you give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself? And you mentioned you're from California and you've been up here for a long time, and you know how you got into politics. And
yeah, great. Thanks, James and Nick. I am glad to be on the podcast with you guys, right? I mean, I think a voice of a local politician sometimes is unusual when we're talking about a congressional race, right? How do you decide on running for Congress? So I'm Lori Chavez-DeRemer. I am been married for 30 years. I've raised twin daughters, primarily here in Oregon, from first grade on up. They're now going to be 27. So I've been here in Oregon for 21 years. Always lived in Happy Valley. And I decided to run for a local office. Really, I started off kind of on a parks committee and then city council for 6 years, and then served as the mayor for 2 terms, 2010 to 2018. I know you mentioned I ran for state rep in 16, and I ran again in 18. Lost both of those, and so now we're going to the losers bracket. As you kind of said, it's difficult to see, but you know that doesn't mean you quit.
Didn't mean to throw that.
No,
I
appreciate it because you know you have to be honest with the voters, and you have to be honest with just people in general, right? You can't win them all, and you have to get up and keep trying.
And you know, sometimes the best candidate doesn't win just because of the way the lines are drawn and just because of other things outside your control. I mean, this district has just gone. It has gone over to the Democrats, and it's going to take a lot to get it back. And I don't think it has anything to do with you or the campaign that you ran. It just it's the nature of the demographics and the gerrymandering to get. Well, I think there's so it's mostly Happy Valley, which is kind of a conservative area, but the district you're running for also included a big chunk of East Portland, which correct. Just brings it from 50-50 over to D+8 or something.
Well, at that time in 2016, it was D+10, almost 11.
Oh.
Why would I ever file for a D+10 district, right? Why would I ask myself that?
Yeah.
But as former mayor of Happy Valley in a nonpartisan seat, when you are serving a population of at one point was 4,000 up to 25,000, and a lot of those people move from around the area, you know, I garnished a lot of support as the mayor because I was focused on values or goals that the entire city had. So it's not hard to talk to left or right. It's what's your focus, what are your values, and can I get them for you as your elected leader? I mean, really, that's kind of where I started. I had kids in school. I had a business that we were starting here. I was new to the community and knew no one, and thought to myself, how do I get involved? And so we all start in the same aspects, whether it's PTA, whether it's, like I said, Parks Committee. And I it's funny because in 2004, I went to the city council and I saw somebody had retired, was going to be moving, and this open seat was going to be available. I remember coming home, I read it in the little local newspaper, and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to run for the city council seat, or I'm going to apply. He's like, excuse me? Seriously. And I'm like, listen, I have a degree in business. I'm an educated woman. I'm raising twin daughters. I just put you through medical school. I run this household. We're starting a new business. I'm pretty sure I could participate very well in a community of 4,000, 5,000 people.
Right.
So I did. I went down there, and funny, they did not pick me. They had no idea who I was. They were like, I want you to get started on a committee. So it's kind of funny that is where we start, but it's no different than, a congressional seat, and you'll hear a starting speech, and it's like, well, I got involved because XYZ. I got involved because my kid wasn't being paid attention to. I got involved because the roads weren't being fixed. I got involved because there's so much regulation I can't do my business. I got involved because I want to feel safe on the streets. Those issues are the same in a congressional run. Maybe on a little smaller scale, but if we're talking about representing Oregon in Congress, the voice is the same. Please stop regulation. Please allow me to be safe when I walk the streets. Please help my kids get educated. Please let me make some money. And please stop putting barriers in the way. Well, guess what? I know how to do all of those things because I've had the experience. So it's kind of where it started, come full circle, 16 years later, and here we sit. So
you're a real life Leslie Knope. You started out trying to fix the smallest of things. Well, and it's funny because we talk with a lot of individuals on this podcast where there's a lot of at the national level, even at the state level. I was on Newt Bueller's campaign, so you get into a lot of these heady 30,000 foot view arguments where good government is the government that, like you say, can just take care of the very little, very basic things. We need a stop sign at 5th and Main Street because people are coming there all the time. It's like, hey, well, somebody's got to actually get up and go do that. We need kids who can get through school and start without needing remedial classes in college. Like, hey, somebody needs to actually stand up and go do that. And then you get towards the more national level and things get bifurcated into R&D. But like you say, at this level, it's who is the person who's best able to actually get something done. And for somebody like you, who's done a lot of stuff, it's a natural fit to kind of climb all those stairs.
That's right. And we extrapolate that. So the stop sign, that seems easy. It should be easy. It's usually actually not that easy.
Right.
You kind of laugh about it, but actually, to be honest with you, when I tried to get signage off of the 205 with directional way to Happy Valley, can we please have a sign that says Happy Valley's this direction? You're talking almost 4 years. They wanted $250,000 to print a sign because I had to go through the regulation. And it took layer after layer after layer to get that done. And people look at you like, really? How is that a thing? Well, government is that thing that can get in the way, right? Those barriers. So, and we might talk about a stop sign, but why do we want the stop sign? Because we don't want our children to get killed. Now that becomes a personal issue for maybe a mom or somebody involved who's had a personal problem. So now you want to fight harder for why that means I need to focus on these little issues. We're talking about funding. We talk about barriers to doing that. We talk about safety for our kids. Those things, I think, where on the national level you have to heighten them, and they can apply to any state in the union that people worry about these things. And so what's happening today that we're seeing, and why would I run today in 2021 for a 2022 seat held by a 10-year incumbent, possibly? Now, my intention is the new seat, and that's kind of a focus of what does that look like. But we kind of mentioned the lines as we first got on. I don't know if that was recorded, but we don't know where that is.
Right.
So to worry about who my opponent is at this time doesn't concern me. I'm more concerned with, is Oregon's 5th district or 6th district or any part of Oregon being represented to the best it can be today by the current representatives that we have? And I would say the answer to that is no.
So you don't have to declare which district you're running for at this stage.
I did file for CD5.
Okay.
And we can move, we can look at that and move that as we see the numbers, but we don't know where those numbers are. And I think that you're going to see maybe several candidates around the nation, not just Oregon, move, and it might not even be CD5, might not be where Congressman Schrader is. Yeah. We don't know where those lines are. So that's up in the air.
There's already Loretta Smith has announced for CD6, and there is, as of yet, there is not a CD6. This is late July of 2021. Right. CD6 doesn't exist yet, but she's already running for it. And it's like, okay, you're just, putting the cart before the horse, I guess. But
I don't think that's uncommon.
We were talking about fundraising a little bit before the podcast, but you have to get started early because you can't get giant $20,000, $50,000 checks when you're running for Congress. You can only get $2,900 per person, and when you're getting a low amount from a bazillion people, you need time to call all those people and build relationships, and you can't just wait until the lines are drawn and then try to throw together a campaign at the last minute. And
COVID played into that. We know that, right? Where we don't have the numbers. We should have already seen where these lines are, which would have made it, by June, or we would have had some numbers, and that's usually the case. So we now know that we might look into September, or depending on
I think September,
if it goes to the courts or does any of that crazy stuff. You can't possibly wait until January or February if it went to the courts to start a campaign at this magnitude.
Right.
So that was important to me. That's part of when you talk about what's your how do you reach out to people and say why I'm a viable candidate, the experience, why I can run a campaign of this magnitude for 10 months and then again another, 6 months after that. I sometimes ask myself that question too, but I've done it before, so I can do it again. How do you raise, $250,000 in just a few months to be a viable candidate across, in other people's eyes? And we've already done so in 2 weeks. We're over the $100,000 mark.
Congratulations.
For $2,900 a person.
That's a lot of people,
I don't think that is, and you know what? I've gotten $5 and $10 and $15 because people are paying attention. They're tired of what's happening. They feel we're in the CD5 is just a lower part of Clackamas, and then it heads south down into Marion County and all the way, to the coastline, right? And almost all of the Central Coast. So what are the issues that they're facing? Well, I can tell you this: they're not being answered as they should have been or could have been in the past. And now people are feeling that with whether it's the workforce, whether it's their kids in school. Again, the safety issue is a big issue. We're feeling it right here in this portion of the district and all around Oregon because Portland's right next door. Yep. And it's kind of creeping out to the suburbs. But it's not something that other people haven't seen in the crime issues across other states. When I'm watching the news, DC, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Chicago, Seattle, and Portland's been on the national news every single night for the last year and a half. Everybody I know who knows I live here, I've even gotten calls, and maybe you have. You live right in the heart. Are you safe? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Do you guys really go down there? Tell me what it really looks like. Because
I get that all the time. Yeah, and we, right outside my condo is homeless people all the time shooting up. I went on a run just yesterday and was coming past the Bank of America building, the Big Pink. That's Bank of America, right? No.
U.S. Bank building.
U.S. Bank. The other one, the other American bank. Anyway, and this lady just is just sitting in one of the little cubbies with a needle in her foot, bleeding out and just kind of staring off into space. And that's common. It's daily. We see that stuff. And, it's tough for, the left likes to blame Republicans for everything, but it's tough when your mayor, your city council, your metro, your state representatives, and now your president, your Congress is all controlled by Democrats. It's like, how is this? You can't just. It comes to a certain point where you can't spin it anymore. You have to put the blame on the people who are in charge, and that's the Democratic Party. You can't blame Republicans for what's going on in Portland because there are no Republicans there.
That worked the last 4 years because they thought they had somebody to blame.
There was a boogeyman at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Now the boogeyman is no longer in office, and again, how do you spin it again? And a one-party system or a one-minded system doesn't really work that well. And you probably find that in your daily life, in your work, in your conference rooms, right? A more of a blended approach to how we solve issues, I would say, is a better approach, a more balanced approach. I found that as mayor, men all in one room, maybe you don't get all of the options to choose a problem. Same with all women in one room. Maybe we don't think alike, all of us. So it doesn't matter. You get youth in a room, their solutions are way more dynamic than my solutions. So I'm always appreciative of having a younger mind in the room. But either way, that's kind of on a simple terms. But one-minded approach is never good. And then when you can solicit even the slightest off and bring them to your side without any reason, and they just say yes to all those, then you got your yes men and yes women. Yeah. That's even a bigger problem. And that's what I find is happening in Oregon.
Sycophancy is a disease that just breeds more and more in and of itself. And if all you do is just have people that agree with each other, and it's just like, oh my God, nothing ever gets done.
And why do you suppose that is? I mean, I know I'm not in charge of this podcast, but really, why do you suppose that you want the yes men and women?
People love to feel that they're right about things. People all people want
echo chambers feel great.
Look at the pictures people put on Instagram. People do it for likes. People do it for retweets. Everything like that. And everybody's like, this is all that people care about is affirmation. Nobody wants to put something out there that challenges thought. Nobody wants to put something out there that they know half their friends are going to disagree with. So you go on Twitter all the time, and we just saw this for the mayor's race in New York. Andrew Yang had millions and millions of followers, and he came in a distant 5th place because Twitter is just this giant echo chamber, and people forget that Twitter is not real life. And it was like Eric Adams I don't even know, it was the Bronx borough president or something like that, who had like 68 people follow him on Twitter.
But he was relatable to the on the ground issues.
He had good experience. People knew what he was. People knew what he was about. He wasn't just parachuting in like Andrew Yang was after the presidential run. And he said, hey, I'm going to take over after horrible Bill de Blasio, and I'm going to actually make this a better city. And everybody on Twitter was so excited for Mayor Andrew Yang. And
well, because of the $1,000 a
maybe
we're going to get a paycheck.
Yeah,
right. We're going to get another paycheck in the mail. Yeah.
So I love that you're kind of trying to keep focus on issues that affect everybody, the crime, the issues that are these I forget the term for it. Anyway, you're going to get difficult questions, difficult topics as it comes later, divisive topics. I don't want to throw you any curveballs or whatever, but what do you?
Anyway.
No, I'm not going to.
Really?
I'm just like, what do you have a plan, or what do you think about trying to keep things focused, keep the conversation focused on where it needs to be, and not get sidetracked by some of these other issues that the left likes to throw at us?
Give me an example of one that you think.
Trump is.
So being the question you're asking me.
I mean,
what are you asking me?
Well,
ask me the question.
It's.
Are you going to vote for Trump in 2024?
Well, I wasn't going to ask that, but I mean, it's
is
Trump.
President Trump running for office in 2024?
Probably. If we assume he is,
I would.
But see, there's the question. So you have to make the assumption, right?
Okay.
Because we don't know. Like, right? We could guess all day long. If you had told me that President Trump could have won the primary when he first started, I don't know if I had believed that.
I certainly did not.
Right? We all were laughing.
We saw him go down that escalator. It's like,
this isn't real. And then he started to be a man of substance that we thought we could relate to when it came to business, when it came to regulation, when it came to we want something different. That's what he was the voice of. We were looking for something better than we had the 8 years prior. So as it moved through the primary, I thought I could get behind what he's fighting for, and so I did vote for President Trump.
Okay.
I mean, I don't not tell anybody that. Okay. Everybody who asked me, did you vote for him? Yes, I did. I was a delegate for President Trump.
That's right, you were.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to go because of COVID, but I was a Trump Pence delegate, and I was looking forward to representing Oregon at that time. Mm-hmm. And I still am. If he runs for president in 2024, I would look forward to seeing what substance he's going to bring for who we are then today, because we're in real crisis. So, to say yes or no, black or white, these issues get more complex and more complex as we move through the system. So if you're talking any big issue, you can always ask me, because I will be as honest and authentic as who I am today, because that's the way we have to be. Yeah. We're tired of dancing around the issue. So that's where I stand.
That's fair.
So I'd be curious in we had Alex Scarlatos come on the podcast at one point, who was the Republican nominee for CD4, and I know a big focus of his campaign was lumber, was jobs, was commerce, was trying to get Oregonians back to work in CD4. In January of 2023, when we have Congresswoman-elect Chavez-DeRemer, and she's going to Washington, what's HR 1? What's going to be the first thing on your agenda that you want to get done, assuming that we've got a Republican Congress, assuming that you can get people on board? I'm sure
they let freshman Congress people pick HR 1.
They do. Right? When we have Madam Mayor coming into Congress, she's going to take the bull by the horns on that one.
Well, and Alex talks about lumber because that's where he's from, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's his passion and industry. And all of Oregon is a timber nation, right? I mean, my gosh, if you can't really go anywhere outside of just right here in Portland and not be affected by the timber industry or get to know somebody who came from there. And during my state rep race, same thing. Go down to Roseburg, go down, anywhere. And
we're sitting in your house right now, looking out at your backyard.
Oh
timber is a very big component of
Isn't it though? Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a slight remodel, and it's
there's a lot of timber out there. Yeah.
And it was quite expensive, and I think I bought it at the height, thinking that wasn't a good idea at this point, because how fast it shot up, right? And so, what is he protecting? He's protecting that same timber industry that should be protected, right?
Even Ted Wheeler, mayor of Portland, comes from timber family,
timber town. Yeah. Well, he got caught up probably in a little bit of more power and control, right?
Well,
you
sure,
start to get again, it gets back to you start to say yes to things and forget your roots, right? And so I can understand that. Alex would fight for that, and I would say he has a reason to. He has a lot of businessmen. He has families who count on that. We counted that for funding for rural schools, right, for timber industry. We should be able to self-fund not only Oregon, but quite a few other states on the timber that we produce here in the state of Oregon, right? So I would say you're going to have to focus on land management. You're going to have to focus on the forestry practices that are now burning down. We're burning down Oregon. I mean, look what's happening right at this moment, that people are losing everything. Not only do we not do that, we don't even invest in the lumber mills to continue to do, have the timber ready for market, right? So we're counting on Canada, we're counting on China, we're counting everywhere except here in our own backyard,
we talk
a renewable resource.
We talk about.
I'd be right behind that argument for those timber people in the rest of the state. Absolutely 100%.
We talk about local farm to table with our food. We talk about local everything, except when it comes to timber, coffee, beer, except when it comes to timber. Instead, we ship it in from Canada. And it's the environmentalists who are complaining about, who don't want us to log our national forests. But at the same time, how do you think we get it down here from Canada? On big old diesel trucks.
That's exactly right.
Meanwhile, we could be clogging up I-5. Meanwhile, we could be cutting timber locally, managing the forests so they don't burn down, and not have to truck that stuff across the country.
Here's my question I always ask when they're in the industry. Let's just keep it on that just for a quick second.
Sure.
Forestry management and, timber families. Who do you think is the biggest advocate of their own industry and doesn't want to destroy it more than they do?
Right.
Just them.
Absolutely.
Why do we insist that they want to destroy their bread and butter and what they actually love, not hate? They don't care. I mean, we can go into the corporate world and say, oh, they're just going to, desecrate the forests, and Oregon's being left with no more trees. And it's just, have you looked outside?
Right. There's a lot of them.
My goodness. And if you've ever gone to their forestry practices or ever gone out there and watched them manage those forests, they cut down a tree every 50 years and they replant twice as many. There's no better advocate for that industry than them. And when government gets in the way of that is where the problem comes, because we think we know better. So I'm all about R&D for the industry of the people who are doing it, because that's the power of them knowing and digging into their own industry to make them bigger, better, and stronger is how we need to apply it for anything that comes out of Oregon. And timber, obviously, trees is the most renewable resource, and it's not going anywhere.
Well, I'll apologize to the listeners, the very few faithful listeners who stick with us for every podcast, because it's a point that I've mentioned before. But I grew up in Texas, and my father still lives in Austin, so I spent a good amount of time down there. And every time I go down, the contrast between Oregon and Texas is frightening, frankly, as a Oregonian, because every time I'm down there, there's Facebook is moving there, Tesla is moving there, Amazon is moving there. When was the last time a company moved to Oregon? When was the last time a startup here in Oregon IPO'd? Dutch Brothers is going to IPO coming up.
And it's the first one in like a decade.
Yeah, and there's like no companies that ever end up being success stories here. We have Intel and Nike, and to Columbia and
Columbia's
Adidas to a lesser extent, Chrysler. Yeah. But like there's very little of a corporate presence here, and I'm right there with you on timber. And to kind of extrapolate it out, there needs to be, I'd argue, a much more stringent focus on commerce, on business, on making it a business-friendly state, on letting people earn money, on letting people keep the money that they have earned. And we don't see that at any level from leadership here in Oregon.
That's
and it's a crying shame.
And the one-size-fits-all we know doesn't apply, right? So again, Portland is not Oregon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This bubble that we have here, and it happens in every state, right? Phoenix and, the rest of the state, or we know that, right? The more liberal policies usually are in the city centers. It's not a shocker to you, and it's probably not a shocker to me. But how we apply the laws is across the state, right? The state legislature. And so now let's get into the districts of even Congress. That's how that works. When the person who's representing the district doesn't necessarily know what's happening in the entire district because of the gerrymandering, because of the one-offs. Like I said, I think Blumenauer reaches down in here to Happy Valley too. Here's an example in the state.
Yeah.
I was the mayor of a city of 24,000. I had 6 legislators representing Happy Valley.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
3 senators, 3 state reps. So if I wanted anything for Happy Valley, as like-minded as they are, I had to call 6 different legislators and try to get them all on board. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to splinter me because they're like, well, I've got Portland to think about. I've got to make sure I'm paying attention to the rural areas. I'm like,
somebody in Troutdale, some other person.
So they cannot balance their focus as a legislator on the area that they're representing of like industry, like business, like-minded, because they're all splintered. And that's what we're going to see here in this congressional race as well, right? So, like I said, Blumenauer, who represents mostly Portland, a 24D district, has a nice little finger down right into Happy Valley.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, this just goes back to gerrymandering. We've talked about line drawing and gerrymandering a lot on this podcast. We were just talking beforehand about the Shelley Boster Davis episode where we spent the entire time talking about gerrymandering. But 3/5 of our congressional districts have a corner of Portland. I live in 972 by design because it makes them all blue. I live in 97209, and when I punch my number into the congressional finder, it says we can't find your representative because there are 3 congressional representatives that service my zip code.
That's what I'm saying about Happy Valley. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, I live on Burnside, on the south side of Burnside, and on the north side of Burnside is a different congressional district. I mean, you want to tell me that the Goose Hollow is different from the Pearl District?
Right.
Like, and the north one goes out to the coast, and the south one goes out to the coast, and then the east one goes out to Hood River, and they all come. They're all gerrymandered in a way that it keeps them democratic because they've got that central core of Portland.
Right. And so therefore, what follows that is the restrictions and regulations, the funding. If you've ever been, they
know their base.
Just like Oregon fights for federal funding, right, from every other major state who's also fighting. So what do we have? 5 legislators. You go to Texas and you've got 55.
Right.
Here we got a little bit of an issue about, and so if they can bring more funding to the federal government, they're going to get more funding back, right? And so they're going to fight somebody like Oregon. So it happens all the time. It's all about balance, and but you have to be at the seat at the table, and you have to represent the people for what they want, not what I personally want always. That's not always a good plan. And so when you asked about focus and stuff, we're talking about law and order. Well, that trickles into every community, right?
Yeah.
And what's happening now? Where's the focus happening in DC when it's, people have been killing people on the streets of DC for a very long time. And now it happens in an elite neighborhood, and all attention is brought to, we've decided we'd like our police officers back. The other issue I'd like to focus on is, in our defund the police nonsense that people have been spouting for a really long time. People can be held accountable for how they act and react in their choice of line of work, and that's happening. But to lump all police officers and all law enforcement who protect us at every turn, and they'll run into any dangerous situation because that's how they're trained, to disrespect authority, disrespect the people and say they don't understand. I often remind people, just like our National Guard, these are our community members, and they want to replace them with a community police force. What do you think that they are?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you just want to change the name of them, but they are our neighbors, and they are our fellow citizens. They're doing their job for their kids and their families as much as they're doing it for you next door. So to degrade and disrespect that law and order is disgusting to me. And I will fight on that issue always.
Yeah.
Same
Agreed.
for the military, same for our youth. Those are my three targets. And along with that comes the drug issue, comes the border issue, becomes the opioid issue, becomes, again, goes back to the core values of your families.
When you don't feel safe, you can't run a business, you can't go for a walk, you can't, like, all of the joys of and freedoms that we participate in as Americans, you can't do those things if you don't feel safe where you are. And I think downtown Portland is a great example of that. The only spot in the state where property values are declining because nobody's moving there. People are moving out of the city center because it's such a disaster between the riots and Antifa, and the things are boarded up and things are closed from COVID, and there's homelessness everywhere. You can U.S. News and World Reports can talk about Portland being the 10th best place in the world to live. Oh, but
God, you remember that list?
Property values are declining because people don't want to live in downtown Portland.
That's right. They're getting priced out of the market too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I just had a question about financing. This is something I was thinking about, so maybe I'm pontificating a little bit. But we're talking about money coming in.
That's what we're here for.
Right. We're going to come talk to you, but I'm just going to say some things that I've been thinking about. But we're talking about money coming into the state, and if you represent a third of Portland and then some outlying areas, you're going to look at Portland as your focus, because those are the people that elected you, and all the money and the policies and everything that you push are going to be urban centric as opposed to rural. I think one of the things that COVID really brought out, at least to me, is how it's the money. The left always talks about the money goes from the city out. It's that they subsidize the rural or whatever. I think it's less of a subsidy and more of a sort of a trade imbalance, because maybe money is going from the urban to the rural, but the goods and services are coming the opposite direction.
Yeah.
If trade stopped between Portland City Center and the rest of America, Portland would die in a couple of days because they'd run out of groceries. Meanwhile, Eastern Oregon... Yeah,
because your truck drivers got to get there somehow.
Exactly.
We're going to FedEx drop it in. Actually, that happened a couple of years ago.
I believe it. But I mean, this happened at the very beginning of COVID, where trucks started being a little bit harder to come by and everything shut down. And, I know a thing or two about supply chains, and I'm like, it's less than a week before we start running out of things in the city center. And so, the left can talk all they want about how the urban core subsidizes the rest of the state. But guess what? Those people out with their ranches and their cattle and their farms, they'll last a long time if you cut off trade, whereas Portland City Center cannot.
No.
So,
and here's the lesson. If you live in it, touch it, or pass through it, you should care for it.
Yeah.
Right? It's that simple. I live here. I could stay in this bubble right here in this nice little house, but guess what? We got to go to work. So I have to pass every one of my neighbors. I have to go through a different city. I have to go into Clackamas County, and I'll be there, throughout the day. Okay, and when I leave there, if I want to go see my daughter, I got to go cross through Selwood, go cross over the Selwood Bridge, and go into the city of Portland to visit with her. So now I care about what does that road look like? Where does the divide stop, right? And it doesn't stop. And so if you only care about that Portland says, well, our property values are higher, therefore I pay for it. And okay, that makes sense. I get it, right? It makes sense to me. My dollars are going to North Clackamas School District, and I don't have kids in North Clackamas School District, so I don't want my tax dollars to go there. No, that really isn't kind of how it works.
It doesn't work that way.
Right? You want it to kind of work that way only when you're not getting the benefit of the school district.
Right.
So not the personal benefit. You know when I don't want to give my money to the school district? Not because my kids aren't there, because when they're not spending it right. Because I'm okay giving my money to produce well-educated children to come back into the workforce, continue to live in Happy Valley, and feed what I have already fed, and continue the goodness of a vibrant area that people want to live in, work in, and stay in. If I send my money to North Clackamas and the teachers don't get any better, and we're shortage of teachers, and the state doesn't fund what they're going to fund, and then they're going to tell me that I need to give them more money, and it's wasted, and then they're not even going to be back in school, and then they're going to require my kids to wear a mask, and then they're going to require, and on and on and on. Now I feel like my taxes are not being spent well, so I want to start to pull back. That's probably what it's what you see in a citizen, where they're like, I don't feel good about this because it's being wasted constantly, and the bureaucracy loves to waste it.
We just had a podcast where we sat with two guys who do a different podcast, and their hook is one's a Republican, one's a Democrat.
She was on there.
Alex and
Oregon Bridge.
Oregon Bridge. Lori was a guest on there as well. So
that's right. Yeah, they beat us to your breaking news. They
sorry.
scooped us. Well, the next breaking news. We'll get you next time. But they Ben, the gentleman who is the left-leaning individual on that podcast, made a point on our episode. He said, well, Republicans oppose, new taxes and new spend. There's a very large deer back there.
I know,
He's just kind of putzing across. He's making we're going to have a deer episode on our podcast.
Sorry, I always have a deer in the backyard.
Yeah, this is great radio. Hey guys, can you see the deer?
But Ben had made the point. He says, well, you Republicans never want to spend taxes, never want to do anything. And how do you expect any services or any roads or anything to get better? And the point that I made was that, and this is not a popular thing for a Republican to say, but I honest to God believe it. I would give every marginal dollar I had to the government if I thought it was better off in their hands than it is mine. If I knew that, my wife's a teacher. She got shot in the eye with a pencil a couple of days ago. If I knew that kids were not going to shoot my wife in the eyes with pencils, teachers were going to have adequate supplies, grades were going to go up, we're going to have better staff, we're going to have better roads, we're going to have fewer heroin addicts on the street. If the government could actually accomplish the goals that it sets out, that it just has in its basic mission statement. If Google's mission statement is, we're going to let you search for things, and then you go there and you say the best restaurant in Portland, and it comes up with a McDonald's in Bend or something like that, Google's not doing its job. It's not going to survive very long as a business. Portland can do this for forever ad infinitum, and then people on the left get mad at us for saying, well, you guys don't want to give any more of your taxes. It's like, I'll give you as much taxes as you want. Just do the basic things that you say you're going to do with the money I'm giving you.
Sure.
And what they say is, well, we just need a little bit more. We can do all these great things, but we don't have the money for it. You need to give us more money. And so the homelessness thing, we just passed another bond measure last year, more homelessness money, which they didn't have a plan for. Now they're coming up with a plan for it after they have the money. Typically in business, you have a plan and then you ask for money to fund it.
It sounds like the infrastructure bill that we're seeing.
Right. The blank check infrastructure bill. But yeah, the city of Portland is terrible. And you know what they're going to do with all that bond money is they're going to spin it around in circles and pay their friend as consultant jobs to just...
bigger government and bureaucracy is never a good thing for what is once a private dollar who turns into a public dollar, right?
Right.
So I work hard, bring home my paycheck. It's very simple. Gets taken out, put into public services. They say they're going to use it for XYZ, transportation fund, park fund, general services fund. That's where it usually gets lost in the general services portion of it, because we can designate it. And then you change offices, and then guess what? This new mayor didn't want what the old mayor wanted. This new congressman said, well, I didn't know that's what they promised, so now I don't want you, right? And all that gets lost and convoluted and whatnot. What I would take it even further is it's not so much we need more just because, but they play on our emotions. Now, why is the homelessness crisis gotten out of hand, right? Somebody might ask you that, and they just want this simple black and white answer.
Right.
Well, because it was tolerated. Yes, that's a true statement. Well, we just allow it because, there was a time of crisis in COVID. Well, that homelessness crisis got out of hand 5 to 7 years prior to that. It's been happening for a long time. Mm-hmm. We know, I'm 53 years old. I know that there's been homeless people or transient people on the street since I was a little girl, but it was very small. The community picked it up. Maybe there were church groups, maybe some private groups, and you tried to maybe make the best of the situation. Our drug crisis has participated in this to no end. There's not a chance in hell that these people will survive if they're doing the drugs of today that weren't around yesterday, so to speak. The wraparound services are limited. They're going to say, well, it's because we don't have enough tax dollars, right? And it does play on our emotions because maybe there's somebody sitting here that I don't know that has maybe experienced homelessness or had a friend or family who was homeless. Well, I can tell you that if that was to be me, the worst thing I could do was to leave them on the street. Mm-hmm. But as a society, we tend to back away and leave them on the street because we can assign all different reasons, right? And we can categorize people, and they do that. Maybe somebody's just lost their job and they're with their family and kids and they're in their car for a temporary amount of time. That's different than a 27-year-old who's been doing drugs maybe for a very long time, who can't hold a job anymore and chooses they don't want to get off the street. Mm-hmm. Very different from a veteran who has given their life for this country and can't manage to get the help he needs, and now he or she is on the streets. Very different categories that we should all care about. But how do we solve it? And it usually just isn't give me more money. I'll try to figure out, lose it in the blue ribbon, yellow ribbon, and green ribbon committee that everybody always assigns to 48 people from very different walks of life. And at the end of it, we have twice as many homeless people. Mm-hmm. And people are frustrated and don't want to give more money. So the tolerance then goes down with the taxpayer and goes up with the leaders who are saying, but we still have this problem. Please help.
And now you get to run on it again 2 years later, and it's just, wow, look.
It's like, we just need a little bit more.
Solve the homeless crisis.
Need more money.
And until it's in your backyard,
it's like,
you don't want to continue to solve it. Yeah. Because it's easy to say, I vote for more taxes, right, over there. Well, if you know our tax system in the state of Oregon, you might not always pay that tax, right? So now you can talk, well, that's a whole nother podcast that we could talk about on how taxes really get taken and given to, because not everybody, one neighbor might not be paying what the other neighbor's paying. But I can tell you that Metro tax for homelessness off of a bottom line of a company, you might have had to write a check for $50,000 or $100,000 off the bottom line. And that business owner goes, this is BS because I can't go downtown and I'm trying to pay for something that I have no control over. Mm-hmm. And our leaders are not benefiting the citizens, in my opinion, today in the Portland market, in the state market, and certainly not at the congressional level. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm running for CD5 or congressional district to represent Oregon, because people are frustrated, people are tired, and they want something different.
Well, I'm certainly tired of what's going on, but
here.
All I got is a podcast.
And a deer.
And a deer.
The deer,
yeah. Well, we are, that's a great place to kind of wrap it up. One of the things we used to do, and I actually should have given you a heads up ahead of time, but one of the things we like to do as we end the episode is ask the question, do you have a favorite Republican and who is it?
You said we did. We talked about this.
I know.
You said we covered all the.
My husband is my favorite Republican.
There you go.
That has not been said before.
He's a smart man, businessman. We start from nothing. We came from farm kids in California. We're farm country, kids. We feed the world in that part of the state. I have a sister-in-law and a brother who are farmers, right? We all start really on the same storyline, and it's like, how do we become our favorite whatever that is? Well, at some point you have to stand for something. And he always tells me that. He's like, Lori, if you stand for nothing, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. Yeah. And so many people right now are feeling like maybe it's changing, but for a long time they stood for nothing because it's just easier, right? We put our heads down, we work hard, we raise our families, and you tend not to pay attention. But I think people are paying attention. And so I want to be the leader of those people who are paying attention.
Well, good.
Awesome.
Good luck to you. And thank you again for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. And
we'll have you back on real soon.
I'd love to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We'll set it up. And listeners, I guess we'll talk to you next time.
Lori Chavez-DeRemer.com.
LoriChavez-DeRemer.com. Thanks for listening to the Rational Republican podcast. Your hosts are James Ball and Nick Perlosky. The show today is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors of Portland, serving the greater Portland metro area for all your garage door installation and repair needs. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at james@jamesaball.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find our episodes at jamesaball.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts.